Let's see what one. Hello, everybody. Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution. This is Constitution Radio, the show that used to be on KMET 1490 AM and FM. See, it was 1490 AM and it was FM. What was it, like 98.1? I do have Alan Myers with me, but I don't know if he wants to share the visual stage here, because at the moment he is just a brick wall. It's like talking to a brick wall. Thanks for being here, Alan. I'm glad you're here, buddy.
I want to look the way people think I am. Okay.
Very good.
Yeah.
If you are viewing this live on Rumble or YouTube, please feel free to chat in the chat room, leave comments, whether you watch live or later, in the comment section. That helps the algorithm for this program on these channels. When we were on radio, we had at least 5,000 to 7,000 for this one station we were on. I was on 3 stations, so I may have had, possibly based on just basic analytics and averages, at least 20,000 people who tuned in to watch me on Saturdays. Not so much now, because we have completely migrated over to Rumble and YouTube. And if we're going to get back to those kinds of numbers, we need you to share this show. So hit the share button, get the link, send it to your friends, hit subscribe or follow, whichever is applicable. Make sure you remember live or watch the shows afterwards. Right now, the live number is minuscule, but we get a few hundred people by the first couple of days. I am a radio guy, so if you go to my video page looking for short, little, nice 2-minute videos, you probably are not going to find them. In fact, I know for a fact you're not going to find them. I'm a radio guy. I'm long-winded, I produce long shows, and I believe that it's important because I want you to have the full context of whatever we're talking about. And so now that all said, today one of the things I want to talk about is, and it's interesting because I was on the phone earlier today with a friend of mine about this very issue. We have all kinds of tools for restoring the republic that we don't utilize, we don't use. And we're very familiar with the First Amendment. I guarantee you, most of you, if not all of you, can name most of the rights enumerated in the First Amendment. When I go on speaking engagements, sometimes what I'll do with my audience is I'll say, hey, just curious where you guys are at. Let's name all 5 rights that are enumerated in the Bill of Rights in the First Amendment. And should I say, and more often than not, 3 or 4, but not all 5. One time I was speaking to the college Republicans at the University of California, Riverside. And before I asked them about the 5 rights enumerated in the First Amendment, I asked them about their favorite television show and who the 5 main characters of that show was. Someone raised their hand. They said The Simpsons, which is that cartoon show on Fox, for those of you who don't watch television. And the whole class, man, they just rattled off all 5 characters. They didn't know what I was going to do to them. They rattled off the 5 characters, and then I said, okay, what are the 5 rights enumerated in the First Amendment? Right off the gate: religion, speech, press. Then they start thinking. Assembly. They could not get the 5th one. The petition clause of the First Amendment reads that Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to petition the government for redress of grievances. The concept was deeply rooted in English and American colonial practice. I have always taught that it is basically our authority to complain to the government, to give them our list of grievances. And we do that in a sense today, and with, rallying or letters to our Congress critter or something like that. But that's not really what it means specifically. It was a practice. It was something that communities did together. It's not an abstract right to be heard, but a concrete procedural mechanism for popular influence on the legislature. The right to petition possessed a direct inheritance from English practice. The right to petition the monarch and parliament was a long-established, if often perilous, tradition in England. It was considered a fundamental liberty, distinct from the right to vote. The English Bill of Rights of 1689 explicitly affirmed the right of the subjects to petition the king. A procedural cornerstone of colonial legislatures, this practice was institutionalized in the American colonies. Colonial assemblies and later state legislatures operated under a set procedural order. Petitions from citizens were the primary way individuals and communities could bring issues to the attention of their government. Formerly, these petitions, often signed by dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of citizens, were presented at the start of the legislative session. They were formally read, often referred to a specific committee for consideration, and a report was expected. A report was expected back from those who had sent the petition from the legislature. We read it. This is what we thought about it. This is what we're going to do or not do. This is the committee that will head up looking into it or whatever. This process was a fundamental part of the legislative agenda. It was the people's direct line to their representatives who were tasked with the legislative power of creating law. The original meaning of abridging in the context of the First Amendment meant exactly what we understand it to mean today. Congress could not interfere with this established procedural mechanism. They could not refuse to receive petitions, refuse to read them, or refuse to consider them. The right was not just to send a piece of paper, but to have it received and processed by the legislative body according to the established rules. It was a right to a formal hearing, not a right to be agreed with. The practice was effectively destroyed by the explosion of anti-slavery petitions in the 1830s. Abolitionist groups, particularly those led by figures like William Lloyd Garrison, organized massive petition drives. From the mid-1830s onward, Congress was inundated with tens of thousands of petitions calling for the abolition of slavery in the District of Columbia and for prohibiting its admission into new territories. Pro-slavery members of Congress, especially from the South, found these petitions offensive and disruptive. They argued that even receiving and tabling the petitions was an implicit recognition of the abolitionist right to question the peculiar institution of slavery, which they believed was beyond Congress's constitutional authority to regulate in the states. To deal with this nuisance, beginning in 1836, the House of Representatives adopted a series of gag rules. These were standing orders that automatically tabled, i.e., set aside without consideration, all petitions relating to slavery. The petitions were received, but immediately dismissed. The gag rule sparked a fierce constitutional debate. Former President John Quincy Adams, then a member of the House, became the most vocal opponent. He argued passionately that the gag rule was a direct and unconstitutional violation of the Petition Clause. He contended that the right to petition was meaningless if the petitions could not be heard, and that the people had a right to use their government to voice their grievances on any issue, including slavery. The fight over the gag rule was a crucial precursor to the broader sectional conflict over slavery. Although the gag rules were eventually repealed in 1844, the damage was done. The procedural tradition of considering petitions as a first order of business was broken. The sheer volume of modern political communication, combined with the bitter memory of the slavery controversy, meant that the old system never returned. The right to petition survived, but its meaning changed. It evolved into a general right to express grievances to the government, which it could choose to accept or ignore, rather than a right to have those grievances formally processed through a set of legislative procedure. In summary, the original meaning of the Petition Clause was a procedural guarantee that the people's formally presented grievances must be received and considered by the legislature. The crisis over slavery petitions led Congress to violate this principle for its own political convenience, and the original robust procedural practice never recovered, fading into the more general and less powerful right that we understand today. So in other words, what I'm saying here is this right that was so important that they added it, they made it a part of the First Amendment, was not just ended. It wasn't taken away. It was abandoned by us. We stopped using it. Alan, since you're with me solo today, the floor is yours totally on responding to this. So what are your thoughts about and we've been talking about this for a few weeks. And I've actually, let me go back a little bit. I think it was about 5 years ago or so, I decided to try to start doing some local petitions, get people to kind of get used to the process. And I found people to not understand it and they complicated it in their own minds. Well, am I allowed to sign outside a box? What's the process? What's the procedure? What does it have to look like? I don't care if it's drawn in crayon. The idea is that the community gets together and those who support an idea sign it and send it to the legislature, and the legislature then addresses it. And my wife says, well, I don't think people want to be a part of something like that because they hate it when they see someone standing outside a wall wanting signatures. That's not what this is. This is a community or a group in a community saying, hey, this is a problem. We're going to sign it. We're going to try to get other signatures, but we're not standing outside of Walmart. We're going to get what signatures is important to this so that we can get this resolved and then send it to our legislature. And the legislature might not even look at it at first. They might even care. They'd be like, what's this? And that's okay. We keep track of it. We say, hey, Congress or legislature, city council, whoever the legislative body is, where's our petition? What'd you do? Oh, well, we discarded it. Okay, fine. I'm going to put it out there. You discarded a petition. And we keep doing it. It's like throwing rocks at a window. Eventually, it's going to crack. Eventually, you're going to break through. And so I believe that we need to get back to petitioning the government for redress grievance with our petitions, even if they're not listening, even if they're tossing them, even if the media is not helping. And because it's a process. And part of the problem with our society today is that we expect everything to be instantaneous. Well, Doug, we've got to restore the republic now. We're not going to restore the republic now. We're not going to turn everything around now. And then others go, well, we got our guy in office. What do we care? That's when we should be pushing even harder. Because now the opposition to the Constitution, they're in fight or flight mode. And it's mostly fight. They're getting nastier and meaner. We need to be more on our toes, more putting in place what we need to do to restore this republic. And just because you got your guy there doesn't mean the republic is restored. So now with all of that in mind, and what I gave you through what I put out there at DouglasCGibbs.com, what's your thoughts, sir?
Well written. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. We have been talking about this. And it is, I believe, vastly overlooked. It's not just a right as it is. It's the first in the First Amendment Bill of Rights. This, to me, like other things, sounds more like a duty. And it is about we, the people, taking our proper position in this republic. It's not to ignore things. It's not to vote and then I get to go to sleep.
Right.
That's not the way this happened. And we can see what has happened over the decades, over the centuries, as people have gone to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that somehow, well, I voted and that's all I have to do. No, that's not all you have to do. I appreciate the understanding now of how active this process used to be and kind of what drove it underground. Yeah, pun intended. But now it's going to come back. It has to.
Right.
This is great. Well, part of it is, from what I understand, is this had been around for many, many years, excuse me, during the colonial time. Mm. And you had people who were willing to act as a community. We need to learn from this. This is not only a duty, this is a community duty. This isn't about complaining. This is about either preventing problems or resolving them. And it is very much in keeping with the other four parts of the First Amendment. It's about being peaceful, but it's about working to communicate, and then let the legislature, whichever one you're sending it to, know we're paying attention. Now, a lot of people in office, they like to use the word, and I really, really do not like this word, you know it too, constituent. Don't call me that. I'm a citizen owner. And if I write this as you would in the Constitution, it's a capital C, capital O. I'm bringing importance to the words. The people in office, they're elected employees, lowercase c, lowercase e. The problem today, I believe, in great part, is that the employees are telling the owners what's going to happen. And that's why we're not working well. That's why the federal government specifically is so very unconstitutional in what it's doing. We don't have a bad constitution. We have a bad implementation of it. We need to get back to it. And then if things need to be addressed, then we'll do it with the amendment process. But I really like about getting people educated to this part of the First Amendment and learning how to actually and practically take it into action. Because now it's not just chatting about it, complaining about it. It's taking action and letting the people, the elected employees, wherever they are, know we mean business and we're going to track what you do or don't do. This is going to be a great thing to get going. And when it comes to fixing things, because I really like the history of our founding, but the question would be, well, we need to fix things immediately. Really? Well, how long did it take to create the Republic?
Right.
Okay. It didn't happen in a week or two. And if you want to go from the beginning, which was April 19, 1775, and take it to the end of the last battle in 1881, but it was finalized in 1883, it gives you an idea how long it took to create the Republic. And even then, we didn't have it after the peace treaty was signed. We didn't have it until the Constitution was ratified in 1888 and going operational March 1889. So from 1773 to 1889, almost 16 years it took. I don't think we'll need to take that much time, but
No.
we need to get on it and stay on it. Thank you, Doug.
All right, no problem. All right, so for those of you who are like, well, who is that talking, Doug? Your mouth is not moving. That's because it was the brick wall that I just brought up. That is my friend Alan Myers, and we'll go back to me now for a little bit. But Alan is a longtime friend, a fellow at the American Freedom Alliance, and has been a co-host on this program on AM and FM radio for a very long time, at least 10 years, right?
Well, no, since 2018.
Okay, so close to.
Was the first time you roped me in by accident?
Roped me in by accidentally on purpose. And now I want to real quick address the chat room. Thank you, chat room. I always love it when you say something. And as Silvermine in the YouTube chat room indicated, a comment will help boost the YouTube algorithm. It does the same thing for the Rumble algorithm. So if you're on Rumble or YouTube, leave a comment in the chat room and below, because it's good for the chat for the algorithm. Silvermine goes on then to say, "Good afternoon from unconstitutional Connecticut." That's a shame too. One of the original colonies. Colin Wood, which is Ed, or sometimes I like to call him Short Bus because he also used to go by Special Ed. Says that the episode title piqued his interest. Well, Ed is a longtime listener over at my Tuesday program on the Untold History channel with my good friend Ron, and so I guess the title "Tools to Restore the Republic" caught his attention, and that's what this episode is about. So we're going through petitioning the government. We're going to go through the right to keep and bear arms. We're going to go through the free market, and then we're going to go through how federalism has been undermined and how we can kind of use reversing things as a tool to get back to our federal republic, to restore our republic, let's put it that way. So now then Gopher in Rumble. Hello, Douglas. Hello, right back. So Collinwood, Ed, when asked about the 5 rights enumerated in the First Amendment, he was quick to type it out. Religion, assembly, press, protest, speech. Ed, you are a member of a very small group. Most people, no idea what all of them are. In fact, if you watch some of these videos of people out on the street, I don't even know if they'd get speech. What was it? Majority of people under 30 didn't know what America 250 commemorated, according to one poll. And Pug's mom says, good afternoon, Doug. Good afternoon. And it is afternoon here on the left coast. It is marching towards evening on the East Coast, and it's somewhere in between. And one of the things I wanted to say in response to what Alan had to say, and I think this is, you said something, Alan, very important. You mentioned that the problem is the Constitution is that we're not following it. And you've heard this, and a lot of my listeners heard this, but for those of you who are new, I think this is one of the best, one of the better, should I say, analogies that I've used in my shows are Ed, of course you're special. You're special to all of us. Chat room. He's worried about being a short bus. So anyway, one of the analogies I like to use, metaphors, whatever analogy I like to use, is our Constitution is like a recipe. It has specific things in it to make sure the structure operates properly. It is not a document of policies. It's a structure of government and how that government's supposed to run, where the authorities lie, things like that. And like a recipe, it's the structure of the meal. The recipe is the structure of how you make the meal. Now, how it tastes comes down to, did you do it right? Did you follow the ingredients? My father, my dad, has this great recipe for salsa. I've been making it for years. Now, I will admit, I have amended that recipe a couple of times with a little extra cilantro and a little extra lime juice. Otherwise, I stick to that recipe pretty much to the T. And his recipe, because of people like me and my brother, we talked about it, and members of the family found out about it. They asked for the recipe. They started making this salsa. My mentor, Tim Curlin, Loki, for those of you who remember the old Blog Talk days, I gave him the recipe, and the first time it didn't work out so well. And he had missed one of the very important keys in the recipe. When you use the cilantro, only use the leaves. Don't chop up the stems. The stems are bitter. The flavor from cilantro comes from the leaves. Then once he did that, then it turned out great. One little sidestep off of the recipe, and it began to hurt the flavor. So as this recipe is moving through the family, finally one day my dad gets this call. Said, one of my cousins says, "Well, Jerry, your recipe for salsa stinks. It's horrible." What was his first words? What'd you put in it? Did you follow the recipe? Did you follow what's written down and you were given to a T? And after the long conversation, what eventually came out of it was he didn't have any limes, so he used one of those plastic little whatever for lime juice, which is like a synthetic something. He didn't have garlic, but he used garlic salt. And he didn't know what cilantro was, but he looked it up, and according to what he looked up, it said Mexican parsley, so he put parsley in there. And the recipe sucked. Dad told him, the recipe's fine. It was your interpretation of that recipe. It was how you changed that recipe that caused the problem. Follow the recipe to the T, and it will work wonderfully. That's our Constitution. Follow the recipe to, and not only have we changed much of the recipe, but in the case of petitioning the government for redress or grievances, we've left out stuff. Could you imagine what spaghetti would be without the noodles? It's sauce. It's no longer spaghetti. How about your lasagna without any cheese? How about your enchiladas without any enchilada sauce? Everything needs to be there. Even removing something messes the recipe up. And that's what we're talking about here. So in many cases, the tools to restore a republic is not much a matter of using the tools, it's restoring them. They're gone. And in the case of petitioning the government, we let it happen. We did it ourselves. Congress waited us out, in a sense. And we gave up on it. Then I was talking to someone earlier about somebody else who talks about this issue. I'm trying to remember the name of the organization now. Something Civics. David Zuniga. So a few of you in the chat room might know. Put it in there if you know who I'm talking about. And I've been in communication with him a few times. He emphasizes petitioning the government. It's a part of his organization. I think that he, like most people, though, make it too complicated. And B, people don't want to be a part of a big organization. They want to know, what do we do? I don't want a big organization. I don't want to administer anything. I don't want my name on neon lights. I want you guys to know these are the tools. Let's do it. Now, I'm more than happy to help out with implementing and talking about it and educating and all that. I might even be cool with Alan keeping a spreadsheet on it, because you know he will, because that's what he does. But the idea here is some organization, some person is not supposed to be who's saving America. We, the people, we go, hey, that's an idea. I'm good at this, though. But that guy, he could run with this. That group could do this and petition. Now, I'm going to work on nullification. I'm going to work on restoring the Great Reset. Yes, that's the book, Ed. And I don't agree with all of it either. And I think some of his methods are off. Some of them are not. But I think he's kind of on the right track. I consider Zuniga an ally for sure. Matter of fact, the person I was talking to earlier used to be a high-ranking person in his organization. So I'm probably going to get in touch with Zuniga about this. But my idea here is I just want to educate. I want you guys, I don't write a pamphlet, booklet, or book. I don't know yet because I haven't written it yet. It's going to be one of those three. And this book is going to explain the history. It's going to explain how they did it, how we ought to do it. What I think is probably a good strategy. I'm not going to administer it. I'm not going to form some organization. I'm not going to go get some nonprofit number. Americans, though, need to know about it. I'll do everything I can to educate. Then Americans need to do what needs to be done to maybe move in that direction. Before I go on another topic, you have anything else? Anything else on that, Alan?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Back to the Constitution. We can call it a contract. We can call it a compact. We can call it a written document. Mm-hmm. The founders wrote it down and were absolutely locked down, specific in what was in there. Mm-hmm. They took over 4 months to verbally fight over it, which means they knew what was in it and they knew what it meant at that moment in time. It got ratified in its final form. For me, it's a contract, which means you read it, you understand it, and you follow it. Like you're talking about the recipe. There is no room, or help me out, because you know the Constitution much better than I do. Is there anywhere in the Constitution, because keep in mind, the federal government did not exist until the Constitution was ratified and put into operation. It is the Constitution that created the federal government, not the other way around. And it's the representatives of the states or the states themselves that actually, excuse me, created the federal government. The states are the parents.
Mm-hmm.
The federal government is the child.
Right.
And is there anywhere in the Constitution that the child was given, because if it wasn't given it doesn't have it, was it given any authority to broadly interpret the contract?
No. Now, that said, you will have a handful of founding fathers that disagreed with what I just said, like Alexander Hamilton, who believed that there were
implied.
Yeah, but I'm looking for a different word. There were powers, authorities that were implied that was somewhere between the lines there that were not expressly enumerated. And he drew that idea from the what's called by in some circles the elastic clause, the necessary and proper clause, and that's not what it says, but that's what he drew from it. And
didn't he mention that to Thomas Jefferson once?
Yeah. The general discussion was, and it was during the debate over the national bank. And while these exact words weren't used, this is essentially what was said. There are clauses in the Constitution, powers given to the federal government that are not expressly enumerated. You need to read between the lines, and in order to see them. And Jefferson said, "I did read between the lines. There's nothing there."
And to me, to respond to Hamilton, I would say this. Let me tell you about your reading between the lines. That wasn't granted to you either.
Right.
And if you want to know what was granted, because you didn't have anything until it got granted, till it was given, until it was written down. And if you don't mind, I'll read it. This is not too long. Mm-hmm. It's the 10th Amendment. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Okay. U.S. government, federal government, you only have what we gave you. And we didn't give you the authority to read between the lines. So Hamilton, not a big fan of his. We need to read, we need to understand, we need to follow.
I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
And we need to get the people the elected employees who are in office to do the same thing. Because if we don't make them, they won't.
Right.
Remember, we're the parents, they're the children.
In the chat room, Collinwood /special ed /short bus says, Jefferson quote, "I've read between the lines, I've found only empty space." He didn't say those exact words. That was basically the, I'm paraphrasing it very badly, but that's basically when they were debating over the national bank. Hamilton was arguing that there were unseen powers, and Jefferson was supporting the idea of expressly enumerated powers. And there was a line somewhere in there where they talked about, reading between the lines. I don't remember the exact wording. So I'm probably horribly paraphrasing it. So if you go looking it up, you will not find it worded in that way, but you will find the general idea of, I've read between the lines and found only empty space. That was the general idea of what he said. As for other chatters, real quick, because I do like to make sure that I pay attention to the chat room. Billy Joe X, I don't understand the first comment about citizenship. Then says the erosion of constitutional values has led to a decline in American values. I agree. Equality was amongst citizens, not the lower orders. That's not true. The idea of equality was based on God-given equality. We are endowed with our Creator. We are created equal. So equality, what they were talking about when it came to equality was natural rights. Our natural rights are given to everyone equally. God didn't, get out there and go, okay, Doug, you're getting all the natural rights. Alan, you're getting all of them. But, Billy Joe, I don't know about you. We're only going to give you 3/4 here. No, we all have all of our natural rights to exercise. The problem with exercising those rights is not God and our God-given equality. It was the reality that government stands in the way often and puts in mechanisms that interferes with exercising those rights. And the Founding Fathers understood that. As you mentioned in the chat room, slavery did exist. And those that were enslaved did not have access to all the rights. They believed that everyone got those rights, but because of certain conditions in society or enslavement or whatever, you didn't have access. This was something that most of the Founding Fathers hated. Majority of the Founding Fathers were against slavery. And, people talk about, well, women. Well, actually, 10 of the original 13 states allowed single women to vote. Most people don't know that. You've got to read their state constitutions. So, and these ideas of what citizenship is and membership to a society, and Billy's trying to lay out the point, a leftist point of, only the elite, slave-owning white men, old white guys got, the true freedom and all that jazz. Jackson wanted to reestablish a monarchy. If you talk about Andrew Jackson, no, what he was pushing for, that's what he was accused of doing. What he was pushing for was pure democracy, and making the executive branch stronger. He was accused of wanting a monarchy. The problem, and Jackson was wrong in what he did with pushing pure democracy. Billy, I appreciate your comments. I'm not going to spend the whole show, though, responding to them. So just be aware. Now I'm going to get back to my original plan, and you can, put out what you want, but and I can respond. But what I'd rather you do is lay out something for me in the comment section, or better yet, go to DouglasVGibbs.com. There's an Ask Doug link in the link bar. And well, we were originally a colony, and we were never supposed to be a democracy, Billy. But then again, once again, I'm not going to keep responding. Go to my website, DouglasVGibbs.com. Hit the Ask a Doug section. Write down everything you want to spew. I'll go over it, and I'll give a general response to what you have, because I don't want you to disrupt the show. I've got a plan. I've got a path I'm going through. All right.
Hey, Doug.
Yes.
Do you want any comments from the founders on what they thought of democracy?
No, not just yet.
Okay.
We will get to that. We might actually kind of get to that later on in the program, but no, not just yet, because, like I said, I've got kind of a layout that I want to follow. And one of them is this too. I've been seeing a lot of cases in the federal court system and a couple in Supreme Court regarding gun rights. And one thing that's always fascinated me was that the modern society totally misunderstands the whole thing. And the reason why the Founding Fathers set up the way they did. And we get this, well, that's a win for gun rights. That's a loss. And sometimes the wins aren't wins. They're actually losses disguised as wins. And often the losses, that this should have never been a case taken in the first place. And there's all these different nuances. So I decided, you know what, we'll talk about this today. And because the Second Amendment, you mentioned earlier with the 5 amendments, the First Amendment, they're a peaceful way to restore the Republic. And as a lot of people like to say, when the First Amendment doesn't work, the Second Amendment follows. Well, I'm not necessarily one that suggests that violence is the way to do things. But there is a lot of legitimacy to that statement. The thing is, we live in a society where every time a tragic shooting occurs, it doesn't take long before this predictable chorus rises up demanding more gun control. And yes, I know gun control is both hands on the. But that's not the kind of gun control I'm talking about here. this reaction. Every time that there's a shooting, we need more gun control. This represents what the Bible describes as the wicked heart that jumps to conclusions without considering the full reality of the world. And what I'm referring to is in the book of Jeremiah, Old Testament. The Bible says that the heart is wicked. Don't listen to it. It's wicked. Now, the Bible is not saying that it's not a binary thing where your heart then must never be thought, referred to at all. Your heart is an important part of your entire process as a human being. What it's saying is the heart left to its own, if that's all you're listening to, it will lead you in the wrong direction. Because the heart, how often, especially because women have much bigger hearts than us guys, right? How often are you sitting, for those of you who are married or have a girlfriend, you're sitting next to your gal and something happens that doesn't affect you hardly, but it's like a news story of a raccoon falling out of a tree. I don't know. I'm just coming up with something stupid. And what is going to be her reaction? Aw, right? Because that's what women do. Because their heart, they have this, they have this huge emotional heart. And us guys are like, yeah, serves them right for going so far out on the end of the branch. That's kind of usually, going to be the guy's reaction, right? So that's just the reality. And what the Bible's trying to say is your heart is going to give you the wrong. So you have to insert reason, discernment, logic, reflection, on history and on society and on your own experiences and so forth. There's so much more. If you only follow your heart, then nothing but wickedness will come out of it. There has to be all of those. The founding fathers understood this. And if every time there's a shooting, your first thought is, oh, we got to stop the killing with the guns. There's so much more to it. The gun is not the problem. The problem is, well, part of it, the heart. The fundamental flaw in our thinking is the assumption that we live in the static world where outlawing guns would actually reduce violence rather than simply shift its form. I witnessed this flawed thinking firsthand during a confrontation with a political opponent during President Trump's first term. After he delivered his standard anti-gun rhetoric, and I say standard because it's the same, it's usually the same stuff coming out of these people every time. Exact same, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's the exact same anti-gun rhetoric. And so I asked if he believed in gun control. And he affirmed, and I pressed further, and I said, okay, so you think that someday all guns should be confiscated from the public? Now, depending on who you're talking to, some will say, well, maybe not all guns. I'll say, well, maybe not immediately, and they'll waffle a little bit, but ultimately, yeah, they do. They believe that someday all guns should be confiscated, that the public, there should be no guns in public. And he agreed actually outright, quickly. But then he added, well, we need to protect the children. That's always the caveat usually. Well, we're trying to protect the children. Oh, well, in that case, that changes everything, right? No. So I continued. And I said, okay, so you'll be fine if all guns held by the public at this moment were confiscated. He nodded enthusiastically until I added, so that the Trump government is the only ones with guns. Suddenly he fell silent. His animated demeanor was replaced by thoughtful hesitation. And that, my friends, is the fundamental contradiction at the heart of the gun control advocacy. History repeatedly demonstrates that making something illegal doesn't necessarily stop its use. Prohibition didn't stop alcohol consumption. It actually encouraged it while empowering organized crime. It made matters worse. The war on drugs hasn't stopped drug usage, or as I like to say, the drugs haven't surrendered yet. And the war on poverty hasn't eliminated poverty. Both problems have worsened despite government intervention. This doesn't mean that the solution lies at the opposite extreme. Oregon's experiment with drug decriminalization, for instance, and I know this because I live in Oregon, devolved into such an epidemic that the lawmakers reversed their policies. The reality is that simplistic solutions to complex problems rarely work as intended, and solutions based on your heart ain't going to do it. The major advantage of having guns in the hands of the public became evident in my conversation with that opponent. If the people don't have guns, the government still will. When the government possesses firearms and the people don't, what happens when tyrants seize control of the halls of government? And criminals will always obtain weapons, and if not guns, then knives or other instruments of violence. Do we then confiscate all knives? Then they start hitting people. So we then pass a law to require hand coverings to prevent people from using their fists. The problem isn't the weapon, but the character of the person wielding it. And there are several important truths that emerge from this understanding. Guns are valuable tools for defense, hunting, and recreation. But in the wrong hands, they can be used in the wrong way. When the public owns guns, the government thinks twice before acting tyrannically. When criminals worry about armed resistance, they redirect their activities towards softer targets. One time I read this article about how the criminal element tends not to want to rob a house that's flying a flag because there's a higher odds that the owner of that house is armed. They don't want to be shot. And if there's a chance they will be, they're going to leave it alone. And then finally, when everyone might be armed, potential assailants face a precarious situation. The majority of these mass shootings have happened in areas that are either considered gun-free zones or guns on the premises are frowned upon. Every time, almost every time. Criminals not going to try to rob a gun store. They're definitely not going to try to rob at gunpoint a gun show. But a place where they say have a little sign on the door that says gun-free zone, well, now you're talking, because you won't get shot at. The founding fathers understood these truths. They studied history carefully. When Rome transformed into an empire, it implemented strict weapon regulations. It banned private arsenals, restricted where arms could be carried. Within Rome's sacred boundaries, carrying military-grade weapons was illegal. Military-grade weapons, now, we're not talking guns. We're talking like swords and spears and things like that. Roman authorities regularly disarmed conquered peoples, provincial peasants, slaves to prevent uprisings. And as the Roman and Byzantine empires became more centralized, emperors like Justinian strictly regulated weapon manufacturing and sales to citizens. The more centralized the government became, the more tyrannical and restrictive it grew. During America's Revolutionary period, the war began partly because the British troops marched toward where? Concord. Lexington and Concord. What was in Concord? Concord, that's where the weapons were. They were specifically marching to Concord to confiscate firearms and ammunition. And throughout modern history, every tyrannical system has confiscated guns. If not universally, at least from the groups they feared most. Taking guns away from citizens is a surefire way to protect government from accountability, allowing it to act without threat of resistance. And the founding fathers, and you talked about what they had to say about democracy earlier, Alan. Well, they had a lot to say about guns, too. George Washington, a free people ought not only be armed, but disciplined. Thomas Jefferson, no free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. Thomas Jefferson, I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. Thomas Jefferson, the laws that forbid the carrying of arms are laws of such a nature, they disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. George Mason, to disarm the people is the most effectual way to enslave them. James Madison, besides the advantage of being armed, which the Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation. Patrick Henry, the great object is that every man be armed, everyone is able, might have a gun. St. George Tucker, this may be considered as the true palladium of liberty. Zachariah Johnson, the people are not to be disarmed of their weapons, they are left in full possession of them. The Second Amendment was never primarily about hunting or sport shooting, or as why am I blanking suddenly on his name, Virginia?
Which one?
Uncle Ted Rocker.
Ted Nugent.
Ted Nugent, thank you. As Uncle Ted Nugent said in an interview one time, We don't have a right to keep and bear arms just in case the deer rise up against us. That's one of my favorite quotes. It was conceived as a safeguard against tyranny, the final check on governmental power. The founders understood that liberty requires constant vigilance and that the right to bear arms serves as the ultimate guarantor of all other rights. The contemporary debate over reasonable gun restrictions misses the constitutional point entirely. The founders didn't view firearm ownership as a privilege to be regulated, but as a natural right to be protected. Any discussion of gun control that begins with what restrictions are reasonable has already abandoned the originalist position. The preservation of liberty ultimately depends not on court rulings or legislation, but on the American people's unwavering commitment to the principles of armed self-defense and resistance to tyranny. As history demonstrates, once we concede the principle that the government may regulate our right to protection. Boy, my tongue is twisted today. We have begun the slow retreat toward subjugation. The choice is precisely what Jefferson described: dangerous freedom or peaceful slavery. The originalist position is clear. We choose freedom with all its dangers over the false security of an unarmed populace subject to the whims of those who govern. I'd like to say hello to Call Me Mom in the YouTube chat room. Good to see ya. I haven't seen Call Me Mom in a while. Call Me Mom has followed me so long that she remembers Blog Talk Radio. Call Me Mom in the chat. Answer me this. Did you know who Loki was? My mentor, Tim Curlin. I believe you were. I believe you were one to listen to some of that stuff too. When I was, what was the show? Founding Truth was one of the shows I did. Yep. Howdy. Yep. She says, yep. Yeah. So Call Me Mom goes all the way back to the Blog Talk Radio days. This is. Do you realize, dear? That's more than 15 years ago. In fact, my radio program, and I'm going to bring it back for this. Call Me Mom. Don't worry. So my radio program that begins with the drum ticks and then the guitar kind of going at the beginning of my Constitution radio program. Her son wrote that and played that and recorded it for me. That's Call Me Mom. So for those of you, I'm going to get back to the point where I start the show with that. So Loki filled in for you while you were having surgery on your vocal cords. Wow. Getting back to other parts of the chat. Ed put out the link to my website, douglasvgibbs.com. Doug's book, Repeal Democracy. Highly recommend. Thank you, Ed. And Silver Mine says lots of gun control here in Connecticut. No doubt. And so once again, if you're listening live, if you're watching live, and this is my Constitution radio program that used to be on KMET 1490 AM 98.1 FM, and it is now migrated to YouTube and Rumble every Saturday, 1 to 3 Pacific. The nice thing for you guys, if you miss it live, you can watch it anytime. But if you watch live, you get to participate in the chat. It is on both Rumble and YouTube. I am paying attention to both chat rooms. If you chat, A, you get the joy of participating in the program. B, it helps with the algorithm. I want to get this show what it was when we were on AM radio. My AM radio programs, 2 stations in San Diego, 1 in Riverside County, and at different points in time, I also had stations carrying my broadcasting in Reno, Nevada, Sacramento, San Francisco, Kansas City, and Columbus, Ohio. I've been on stations in all of those places over the last 15 years, but after 15 years of AM FM radio, not doing it anymore. But we're here. As we were ending my time on radio this year, based on what numbers I knew of, I had at least 20,000 people listening to me every week. I want this show to go beyond those numbers. Let's get past that number. Let's get the subscription above 20,000 on both Rumble and YouTube. Let's get the listeners coming. So please put the word out. Oh, come on, call me, Mom. We're not old. We're older. She says, by the way, friends don't tell friends that the 80s were 40 years ago. That goes for BTR being 15 years ago, too. Laugh out loud. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I never thought I'd come to the point in my life where I could say, I remember 50 years ago, but I do. All right, Alan. Now I spent time talking to the chat room. Oh, one other thing. We used to have advertisements. We'd be getting ready to go to our second break at this point during the show. No breaks right now. Down the road, I'm going to start adding breaks just so you guys have time to go to the restroom. I can advertise my books, whatever. But right now, we are break free. So for 2 hours, you got to put up with us. Well, but we will. All right, Alan, I just spent a nice, before I went into all that other stuff, nice, big, long amount of time talking about our right to keep and bear arms. And the truths that are behind it. There's so much more to it than what people seem to realize. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I take this from a little slightly different point of view.
No, of course you do. And folks, for those of you who are not regular listeners of Constitution Radio, almost every time that's how he starts his. I'm going to take a different play, and hopefully Dennis will start joining us again. Dennis and I will be like being total, and he'll say, well, I'm going to take a different angle, but go ahead, take your different angle, sir.
Thank you. Now, I do give a presentation on the Second Amendment, and I've actually given it to 2 history classes at the college level. I feel I have a decent understanding of this amendment.
Okay.
And I also did research to get an idea of what was going on before it was written. And part of it is finding out that 4 states, I don't have them in front of me, 4 states had a state constitution prior to July 4, 1776. But if you go through all the original old state constitutions, you'll see a lot of words and verbiage that are very similar to what the Second Amendment says, which means this amendment, when it was written, was not that new. They were just codifying it. But the way I look at the Second Amendment now, constitutionally speaking, and this is all Doug's fault, is, to me, I'll open the discussion with this. I said, I want people to understand the Second Amendment is not about guns. It's not. Now they'll shake their head. What? Okay. Keep in mind, the Second Amendment is one of the shortest of all amendments. It's 1 sentence, 27 words long. Yes, I counted them, Doug. 3 commas, 3 words in the Second Amendment. They're common nouns, but they begin with capital letters, which is their way of emphasizing that word. A well-regulated militia. We know militia is capitalized, meaning it's important. Militia, according to George Mason, is that it's all the people except for a few political officials.
The whole of the people, I think, is the words he used.
Right. Well-regulated. Well, when something's well, that means it's, let's say, better than normal. Regulated. We go to the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, and we find out regulated means put in good order. And this was written because it's telling, to me, it's very telling that this new thing called the militia has to be well regulated, put in really good working order, which means it has to be disciplined, organized, trained, and equipped. Because you're talking about a bunch of shopkeepers and farmers. These aren't professional soldiers. That's what I get out of a well-regulated militia. The second of 4 parts, to me, is what the Second Amendment is about. Being necessary to the security of a free state. State begins with a capital S, and we're talking about an independent, individual, kick your khaki, stay out of her business, political entity.
So you're not talking about when people say state, like the government, the state kind of state. We're talking about the actual entity, a state, capital S.
Yes.
State of California, state of Massachusetts, state of Oregon, and so forth.
Now, it begins with being necessary. Is there anything vague here? Kind of open to broad interpretation? No.
Not yet.
To the security of a free state. this is absolutely locked down clear to me. This is what the Second Amendment is about. It's about the duty of the people, the militia, to protect the security of their free state. And who are they going to have to protect it from? They're worried about this new thing just called, that was created, the federal government. Third section.
Because when it comes to being protected against something, we no longer have fears of the states against foreign attacks, because that's what the military is for.
Right.
So then the question becomes, okay, so then what is this threat? If it's not from without, then it must be from within.
That's the federal government. Third section, the right. Notice it's the right, not the privilege, not a grant, not a gift. The right of the people.
And it's the right. It is a specific right.
To keep and bear arms. Keep is to have. Bear, we go back to the 1828 Webster's Dictionary. Bear means to have on your body, even under your coat. So the right for people to keep and bear arms.
And it uses a gun under one's coat. Matter of fact, as an example in the Webster's Dictionary of 1828.
And arms is capital A. So it's emphasized. Arms comes from the Latin word arma. Arma means weapons. Weapons means everything, not just muskets. So what we have is a well-regulated militia, well-trained people. They're there to protect the security of their free state from this new thing called the federal government. They have a right to keep and bear arms, weapons, not just muskets. And then it ends with this. Shall not be infringed. Shall not is not vague. It is absolute. Be infringed. Tread upon. What is it about these 27 words, as simple and direct as they are, that the federal government doesn't understand? For me, every federal government law, rule, regulation, whatever, regarding firearms is unconstitutional. It's not for them to control. It's for each state to control. And this is something that we need to get back to. Now, if you want to talk about shootings, and I'm not minimizing it, one of the problems is, and I go back to what Franklin said, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. Well, being free means you got to be responsible and you got to behave. And to me, the term gun control is about hitting what you're aiming at, not limiting who and what people can have. But if a state decides to limit this, that's the state's business if it's constitutional. The federal government has no say-so on this.
So what you're saying is the states have an authority over gun rights, and the federal government does not, which is actually consistent with the preamble of the Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights indicates that the first 10 amendments were written and put into place in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, it being the federal government. That is not to say that the states can stomp all over your right to keep and bear arms. It is still a natural right, but it is allowed to make certain necessary laws, and that's the key word, necessary. And the word necessary is used in that elastic clause we were talking about earlier. Government's job is not to make any laws, to make the necessary laws.
But for me, what a state decides to do within its boundaries is its issues and the citizens of the state. But it's not.
In other words, guns is a local issue. Your rights are a local issue.
Is not a federal issue, which means anything happening at the Supreme Court level is unconstitutional. Gun control, the way they're talking about, it's about gun confiscation and ownership limitation. And if guns are so bad, then the more you put together in a room, the worse it is, right? Mm-hmm. And how many shootings have ever happened at a gun show? That would be zero. How about at a gun shop? That would be zero. Now, what's interesting about what Rome was doing at the height is, as you were talking about it, it was limiting, controlling, and you know the term crossing the Rubicon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Rubicon was a little waterway outside of Rome, and no general could cross that line without permission, because if a general came across the Rubicon with the troops, that was the threat to Rome.
Right.
So when they're, so when they say don't cross the Rubicon, stay out of it. And how the federal government cannot understand these 27 words, it is, for me, so very disappointing. The fact that the people in the House and the Senate don't get this. But this is another reason why the 17th Amendment is so bad, because the states lost their ability to send people to the federal government, the Senate, and speak for them, the state, instead of just popularly elected. So for me, it's with a federal government that is trying to get more and more unconstitutional control over your life is going to push this scenario. And that's why this is just another example of what we, the people, have to do to stop this incredible, unconscionable, unconstitutional growth, because it's not their business. And if you really want to reduce the federal budget, get the federal government to stop doing things that are unconstitutional. How's that?
That sounds great. Now, back to the chat. I have both chats up in the Rumble chat room. As I began my presentation regarding the Second Amendment, Colin Wood /Shortbus, who's a listener, a viewer of my shows on Tuesday. In fact, I've met Ed when I was doing a tour of the country, and I had events all around the country. And when I was in Ohio, he came out, he and someone from West Virginia met me and had lunch with me. And it was a good time. That was 2 years ago, 2 Mays ago, right? 2 years ago when we did that and had the tour.
That was nice.
Yeah, that was very cool. We had events and stuff all the way around the country. It was great. He said, off to work. Have a great weekend, everyone. So he stayed long enough. I'm sure he'll come back and listen later. And then Call Me Mom talked a little bit about some of the Militia Act language that's in the U.S. Code. You got to remember, though, that Call Me Mom, that language was added after the creation of the National Guard and based on the Militia Act of 1903, I believe. And so this is more than 100 years after the ratification of the Second Amendment and the understanding of militias and all that. That said, some of it's good language, some of it not so much. I guarantee you, when it comes to the unorganized militia, age and ability to carry an arm and all of that is history as none of that's going to matter if the if feces hit the rotating blade. And then we have because Billy Joe has since vanished after trying to troll this show, and we have someone else, Justin Harris, who's throwing a couple things out there, and so I'll address him, but I'm not going to spend the whole show playing the game. So Justin, don't think you can troll, because I'll address a couple things. I love the idea of the Constitution. I did not sign it. It binds government, not man. True or false? That is essentially true, but let's make sure there's some context, because in his next thing, he says, the next chat comment, he says that man has authority over itself. This is more or less true. Constitution is laws written on paper. No, it's not. It is the law. It is the supreme law of the land. It is not laws. It is not statutory law. It is a constitution that serves as the structural that creates the structure of government. Policy essentially is not in there. Authority is. And so there's a difference there. And so let's not get those mixed up. On paper, to bind the servants, not man, a government is a service. More or less, once again, the Constitution was written to establish a federal government, but limit it in its authorities. Because the reality is, as human beings, we need government. It's a necessary evil. If we're going to have a orderly society, there has to be some type of government system. Without government, there's no freedom. Too much government, there's no freedom. So it's a matter of balance. It's a matter of a proper distribution of powers. If I'm, I live out in the country, if there was no law and there was a lot of lawbreakers in my area, I wouldn't be able to go to town because I'd be worried about my place being attacked. But because we have a sheriff, because government is there, I don't have to sit on my front porch with a rifle on my lap. So government is necessary, and the system was created, the structure was created for that. But once again, and Polybius, Greek philosopher, lawmakers shall not be the lawgivers shall not be the lawmakers. That's where separation of powers comes from. You got to do things to government to make sure that they don't become tyrannical, and that's the point of the Constitution. Call Me Mom says, I think that God has authority over man, thus the laws of nature's God are over that of government. And that is an accurate statement, Call Me Mom. And you get into the Declaration of Independence, because that's where you got that language from, nature's laws of nature's God. And that is a reference to the rule of law. I tell people this all the time. The representatives in Congress, people say, well, they're beholden to their constituents. They're supposed to do what we tell them. No, they're not. They represent you. But their number one responsibility is not to you, it's to God. It's to the rule of law. And the rule of law is the natural order of things, which is connected to God's law and the laws of nature and of nature's God. And so if the people want to, for example, demand that the representatives all pass a law that will imprison and execute everyone with green eyes, well, that goes against the rule of law. That goes against the laws of nature's God. And so their responsibility is not to the constituents, it's to the rule of law. And the rule of law says that's bad, so they don't do it. This is the reason why we're not a pure democracy. They're not completely required to follow everything that the people demand. Now, that said, that doesn't mean they're supposed to do the opposite extreme and ignore us. This is where the rule of law comes in, all of that. So, all right, very good. We are past the halfway point. This is a 2-hour program. It has been for a very long time on KMET 1490 AM. At this point, about 10 minutes ago, we would have returned from our middle of the program break. Top of the hour, that those radio stations, they got to do their little thing of who we are and the weather and the traffic and a couple of news items, and then in our case, because I was buying time, then there would be a little PSA that would say the opinions of this broadcaster show. I can't remember the exact language. Does not necessarily program. Thank you. Does not necessarily reflect the opinions of this station or its staff or something like that. Employees,
affiliates.
You got a better memory than me.
Yes, I do.
I'm here to tell you that the opinions of this guy does reflect the opinions of this program, because it's my program. And if you don't like it, feel free to either not listen or participate in the chat room or send me a little letter of crying about it, and I'll be sure to print it and then throw it into and file it in my rotary file that I keep right here next to my desk on the floor.
That's that portable fireplace, right?
Yeah, well, no, that's the other one, but I might put it in there too. I don't need a shredder anymore. I could just burn everything. But and Call Me Mom, I am sure you are aware, I am of the opinion that the SCOTUS destroyed the rule of law under Obama by taking to themselves the power of the dictionary to legislate via redefinition. Call Me Mom, that began long before the Obama presidency, and the courts have been playing this game with judicial review and interpretation and deciding that they're going to play games for over 200 years. And they gave themselves that authority or power that they think they have the power anyway.
Hey, Doug?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Since the judicial branch comes out of Article 3, where in Article 3 did it give the judicial branch the power, the authority to broadly interpret and to redefine words.
Exactly. It doesn't. And they took that upon themselves. That's part of the problem. And then Call Me Mom says, well, then the rule of law has been destroyed. It has been, but it can be regained. It can be restored. Getting rid of judicial review is one of those ways of doing it.
Don't they have to take an oath regarding the Constitution to become a Supreme Court justice?
And by taking that oath, they think that means that they can strike down anything they think isn't constitutional.
So they can lie by taking the oath.
They don't see it that way. Because remember, they don't believe the Constitution is what's written in this document. They believe what's the Constitution is what their predecessors in the courts have said.
Case law.
Case law.
And even though they were constitutionally
unless they disagree with that case law, then it's not constitutional. And then they'll create new case law to fix it.
So case law based on improper reading of the Constitution is their authority.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And you know what that's called? Because see, Call Me Mom in the chat room, we're talking about the rule of law. I mentioned the rule of law. What we just talked about is called the rule of man. You have the rule of law and you have the rule of man. And if you abandon the rule of law and you start embracing only the rule of man, it don't take very long before you start dancing around a golden calf.
Crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Call Me Mom, you're exactly right. And I wrote an article not very long ago about the problem that what has happened in our system is what's the right way of putting this? A court system that operates based on ideology. And that's the problem. And because they're supposed to be apolitical. So we're talking about this yesterday on Patriot Soapbox, my wife and I. So, Lady Justice has, in her hands, the sword and the scales. What's across her eyes? A blindfold. What that means is that she is justice supposed to be blind to everything but the law. But we watch these rulings coming out of the Supreme Court now, not just even now, and understand. I'm not talking about where the rulings went. I'm not talking about the actual decision. I'm not referring to that. In fact, the problem is this. The judicial branch was designed by the Constitution to be the weakest of three branches. Judicial review is unconstitutional. Interpreting the Constitution and federal law in the manner that the courts do it is unconstitutional. Striking down laws and executive orders with their rulings is unconstitutional. I know that this perspective for some people, like a couple of those trolls out there that have been in the chat room, would seem foreign to them. It'd seem wrong to them. May even be confusing to some people. But what it should do when we talk about how they're operating in the Constitution, it should raise for you some fundamental questions about the proper role of the judiciary in American governance. So, and if all of that's unconstitutional, and they're operating based on opinion and interpretation, then what that does is that creates something even bigger, a bigger problem, which is ideology. Then if they're operating based on opinion and interpretation, then what naturally has emerged in the court is ideology. They're supposed to be blind. The law only matters. Ideology is not supposed to have anything to do with anything. Doesn't matter what they think on an issue from their heart. What does the law say? And so when adherence to original intent is labeled conservative or partisan, when we can say, well, that was a conservative justice or a liberal justice, then it reveals how far we've really strayed from the original constitutional design of the court system. I mean, the constitutional job of the justices from an original viewpoint is to apply the law, not create policy preferences, not to create law, not to change what the law means or to change definitions of words, as Call Me Mom saying in the chat room. The very fact that we can predict how justices will rule based on their supposed ideological leanings demonstrates that constitutional interpretation has become the norm. Redefining things is the norm. Modern politics, it's evolved into policy making. And so we have these leftist or conservative judges. I mean, this idea of leftism, conservatism in the justices, much less everywhere else, would have horrified the framers of the Constitution. Article 3 judges were intended to be insulated from politics, precisely so they could apply law impartially. Life tenure was meant to free them from political pressure, not to entrench ideological factions. The distinction between applying versus interpreting the law is crucial. The modern view that the Constitution is a living document, and see, that's what that was the whole point. We're trying to get away from English common law. English common law was a living, breathing mechanism that could be changed with the whims of the public, their change of culture and decisions by judges. I mean, if our Constitution is a living document, well, then the judges can have all the creative interpretation they want, and they're effectively legislators. The judicial system has accelerated both political parties, as judicial activism has accelerated. Both political parties have recognized it as such. They're like, hey, we could do our will through the courts. So both parties are guilty of this, using the court as a policy-making body rather than a legal one. And then the problem compounds itself. Once judicial review was established, it became inevitable that presidents would nominate justices based on their expected policy outcomes rather than their judicial temperament. And so now we have this polarization in the courts, and it's very problematic. The courts shouldn't be right or left. They shouldn't be political. And from a constitutionalist perspective, the only solution is to return to the framers' vision: justices who apply the law as written rather than according to their policy preferences. This would mean recognizing that the Constitution doesn't contain policy prescriptions. It establishes a structure of government and leaves policy decisions to the political process. That's what I was saying earlier. The existence of judicial review, this idea of implied powers, the tension between limited government and judicial review, is one of the most central constitutional paradoxes of our time. And think about this. The federal court, the Supreme Court, is a part of the federal government. The Constitution is supposed to create a limited government. So we have a part of the federal government deciding what is constitutional. So what we have is the federal judiciary determining the scope of federal power. Well, if that's the case, the limited government becomes whatever this court says it is, which is no limitation at all. This is not a topic I expected to get into, but I'm glad we did. It's not on my list, but I'm glad we talked about it. Alan, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was looking for it and I didn't see what you were saying, but very nice.
Yeah, no, I did. This is not some recent article. I have written about this many times. I'm sure you can find articles that say exactly what I was saying. I know that there's one, the ideology of the Supreme Court, I think it's titled, from like a week or two ago, that pretty much almost follows what I said. But no, what's your thoughts based on what you heard?
Well, people talk about English common law, different aspects. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, and which, as you mentioned, in essence, wasn't really written down. It was known, and depending on the time of the day and location, it might change,
right,
moment to moment. Well, when I think about English common law, I think of one thing: it was meant for subjects, not citizens.
Right.
So, it's like, don't even bring this into me. I don't care. The fact that the court system has absolutely left its common constitutional limitations and decided that it will interpret the Constitution, it's a power play. The court is not happy being the third of the three, the third week, or in level of strength, you have legislative, executive, judicial. They don't like being at the bottom.
Right.
When, if they did exactly what they were supposed to do, they would be a very powerful constitutional force.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they're attacking the document they allegedly swore an oath to protect. Ideology has no place here. It might have a place in creating laws or a movement to create certain laws, but once the laws are in place, apply them. Don't sit there and broadly interpret them, because now you're not playing the game according to the rules. And this brings great disgrace onto the judicial branch. And my understanding is that if you go to law school, you will take at least one, maybe two constitutional classes. They call them constitutional, but they don't learn the Constitution.
This document doesn't get opened during the classes typically, and if it does, it's to mock it.
Well, they learn case law,
right?
Which means you're not learning what you really need to learn.
I've had 7 people with law degrees attend my Constitution classes, and all 7 of them told me they learned more from the Constitution for me than they did in law school.
Which means they're not learning because they're not being taught the Constitution in law school.
Right.
That is frightening. But it also shows how the profession has developed over the centuries. You're going to swear an oath to protect and defend, but you don't understand the document.
Right.
Crazy.
Next topic, since we have these democratic socialists all appearing everywhere, let's talk about the free market. We want to restore republic. We need to get back to having a free market, and we never really had a truly free market because out the gate, a national bank was proposed and approved, interfering with the free market. So we've never ever given a total free market a chance, but our market has been freer than the rest of the world, and therefore we've become the most prosperous country in the world. But now we have a rise in this country, or down with capitalism. Communism, socialism, replace the capitalism. Capitalism, by the way, is not an American term. That's a term that Karl Marx gave the free market to, turn it into an ism. And one time I was talking about this, and a friend says, well, I don't know if I want a free market. I want a fair market. What the hell is a fair market? What one person thinks is fair is not free. And when I say free, I don't mean free of cost. I mean free as in free to, liberty, right? And I mean, I understood his intentions. They were kind of correct. But the problem is we've got this makeover of the word free. We've got this makeover of founding fathers. We've got this makeover of capitalism. This makeover of all of this has been made over with erroneous ideas, and nobody seems to understand the truth anymore. So, well, yeah, but I had one person once say to me, well, people are too free. If they're free to do whatever they want, then there's a problem. Well, with freedom comes responsibility. We're supposed to be a responsible people. And in order to be a responsible people, responsible with our freedom, we need to be a virtuous society. People who are not virtuous are the ones that are screwing it up. And when we say free and freedom, free market, or you're free to do because you have a free society, that doesn't mean free for all. Do as you please without any restraints either. Understanding that, we have to be careful that we don't lurch too far in either direction. Words have meaning. We're supposed to also apply common sense along the way. There are always exceptions, alleviations, reasonable expectations as we navigate the waters of history and liberty. I have the freedom and the right to swing my arms. I am free to swing my arms as I wish. On my property, at my house, in public, as long as I'm not, what? Swinging my arms into somebody else's body or things. I have to be responsible with that right. If I swing my arms while performing another task, it may create a dangerous situation. So I have to use common sense. Don't swing my arms while I'm operating my tractor or driving my car or eating dinner. I also don't swing my arms in the crowd. Why? Because I have the right and freedom to swing my arms, but others have a right not to be struck in the face with my swinging fist. It is my responsibility to be responsible with my freedom to swing my arms. And while there should be no government prohibition regarding the swinging of my arms, there will likely be consequences according to the law if I try to swing my arms while driving my car, or if I swing my arms into someone's face, or if I crash my car because of my arm swinging activities. So yes, I am free to swing my arms, but the word free does not mean that there are no limits, that there should be no limits. Most of those limits, however, need to be self-imposed while assessing the situation. Now, if I don't self-impose them, the government will impose them, because then I'm probably whacking somebody or whatever. A few might be imposed by the culture, which I guess is a good thing if it's a virtuous culture. Certain members of the public who have a respected voice, or the laws imposed by the government based on the details of the situation and the impact those details might have on the overall functioning of orderly society, or the rights of others might have something to say about me swinging my arms. There's a lot more to it than just swinging my arms, and swinging my arms is not a completely free activity. And for the most part, that is how all of our freedoms, rights, American activities are supposed to operate and be governed. There should be no law against swinging one's arms. But there should be one against striking someone in the face while swinging your arms. While I should be able to swing my arms in a responsible manner and in a way I prefer without government dictating to me my personal activities, the government should not call for the removal of my arms because I might use my arm swinging pursuits in an irresponsible manner. The government should have laws in place that may address the results of me swinging my arms in an irresponsible manner. And if government doesn't have such laws, once a few faces get smacked, the people will likely call for those laws, and they will emerge as time passes. This is the nature of freedom and liberty, and the real application of the consent of the governed. Freedom and liberty are not calls for a libertarian free-for-all, but the dangers of freedom and liberty being used in a manner that could have sour consequences does not mean we need to go in the opposite direction and succumb to rigid government regulatory tyranny. Our free market is the same. So, of course, when I say I believe in, and I am a firm supporter of a free market economics, I'm not saying that I believe no holds barred, out of control, an out of control, chaotic free for all. But at the same time, I do not support the irresponsible, uncontrolled meanderings of government, corporations, or a mercantilistic combination of the two, claiming to be residing in the false name of free economics. I seek balance, checks and balances, as we do with all things American. We have a civilization now deeply influenced by ideologies, philosophies that stand in opposition of the free market. Karl Marx created the term to label the free market ideals of American economics, capitalism, because he wanted to be an ism. For fear of being a stereotype of the things that left-wing ideologues claim are the results of the sins of the free market economics, we have moved away from the laissez-faire intent of the Founding Fathers, and now we have some kind of hybrid of what we once had and the socialist version of what would be fair, and now to the point where now we're even toying with communism with the DSA knuckleheads. And suddenly, what has been advertised as irreconcilable opposites, capitalism and socialism, they share a common core in the rejection of the originally intended idea of free market economics as envisioned by the framers. Because even now the capitalists are saying, oh, well, we can't do it that way. How is it that we are willing to give up a winning combination through paradoxical contributions that is actually facilitating the disappearance of foundational principles of what the free market is actually truly about. We have replaced our liberty and our free market with regulations, our workers with foreign labor. We've conjured up this hyper-administered system that benefits the global elites while claiming they are protecting us from the corporate robber baron elites who are laughing in the corner with the very people claiming to be that they are our saviors. And then on the other side, you've got the people saying, see how bad it is? Embrace socialism. They're convinced that a true free market is dangerous. Now, regulatory influences by government across the board are absolutely necessary. And they're working to change the system. And they do so unapologetically because their implicit goal is to dismantle the free market, terminating the foundational principles that not only were instilled into our system by the founding fathers, but have historically crafted and sustained Western civilization. Historically, when free market ideals are unleashed in a system, even in a limited manner, thanks to the over-intrusive nature of today's style of governing, the free market always wins. Economics always improve and prosper every time. And while the enemies of the free market promote socialistic ideas and call for government intrusions into the very heart of what the concept of a free market is supposed to be about, inserting their forms of regulation or control over the means of production, the location of the workforce, the rules of marketing, and the method of delivery, if one dares to question one iota of their theory, we're warned about how dangerous a free market can truly be if a free market is unleashed without their ideological foot on the brake. Freedom, if untethered to government influences and control, they assure us can be catastrophic. Then they parade in front of us realities of the industrial titans of the Gilded Age, the claim of collusion between corporate elites and legislative members, both of the state level and the federal level. Same argument that brought about the 17th Amendment, Teddy Roosevelt's trust-busting, monopoly dismantling. And the accusers turn out to be the purveyors. The free market was never supposed to be a free-for-all. That doesn't mean it's intended to be suffocated by excess regulations and socialist ideas to be put in place by people who have never navigated through the turbulent waters of starting a business, who have ever waded through the red tape of running a business, paying the taxes, dealing with employees, the wide array of other issues associated with receiving and shipping, and operating under a constant threat of government fines and hostile lawsuits. Our free market is limping at this point. It's not gone, but doesn't need to become something that it was never intended to be, other than a free market. And I don't care how much the term has been demonized by lefties, progressives, socialists, Democrats, communists. Then I'm being redundant with all those words. A responsible free market does not outsource production to lower cost countries. It does not collude with government. It does not import illegal aliens to perform the work they falsely claim the average American would not do. And it does not attack the sensibilities of its consumers through methods that are devoid of ethical values and designed to bring about the self-destruction of the very free market values they claim to tolerate. Fortunately, the extinction of the free market as originally intended is not inevitable. We do have those in our midst who recognize that while laissez-faire may be gasping on an operating table in the emergency room, we have available to us all of the proper medications: localism, local production, domestic trade freedom, business ethics, creating an environment that encourages American manufacturing, American employment, American innovation, putting into place policies and restraint on certain federal intrusions that encourages the dignity of American values and production over blind corporate profit sought in an irresponsible manner. The free market is a responsible market, just like the swinging of the arms. It's responsible, based on private ownership, private production, private innovation, and growth that impacts communities and the entire market, rather than a boardroom hidden somewhere in some high-rise tower with colluding government interests shaking hands with those corporate people behind closed doors. Otherwise, thanks to the heavy weight of cultural Marxism, who might end up with a system drowning in socialist ideas, centralized government engineering, government-owned and or controlled means of production, a mundane infrastructure devoid of innovation and growth, and the end of the dawn of American enlightenment as envisioned by the founding fathers. And before you respond with some, and I don't mean you, Alan, I mean some of the trolls out there with some leftist Democratic Party commie talking point, don't forget one more thing about their tendencies. The opponents of free market economics lie about everything. They want to convince you that their way of doing things works even though history says otherwise. None of the ups and downs in a naturally operating free market has anything to do with racism, sexism, transgenderism, cultural fairness, or whatever else they claim has anything to do with it. It's all about the numbers, supply and demand, consumerism, what the market calls for, likes and doesn't like. Moral degradation doesn't sell, but quality products do, especially when the cost of doing business is reduced because government gets out of the way, and as a result, prices come down. Unfortunately, the opposition to the free market goes way beyond what you see on the surface. It's poisoned by wickedness, pure evil. There are forces that seek to oppose the very foundation of America. And going after free market economics is a key way to do so. They need chaos. They need destruction. In the streets, inside the hearts of and in the economic system, in the end, it has nothing to do with economics and everything to do with ideology, which is what we started the show with. And the systematic destruction of the American system, laissez-faire and all. So a free market, a responsible one, is fair, but it's not a fair market, and I won't call it that. It's a free market, responsible, private, operational with as little government interference as possible. That's what the founding fathers intended. And it is our duty to embrace that inheritance, no matter what the socialist lefty commies say about it. And if we do it right, we will not only launch a golden age and make America great again, but we will push back into their shadowy hiding places the forces against the free market once again, at least for a while. You know who you are, you purple-haired, wearing too much jewelry on your face, libtard DSA people. You know who I'm talking about. You know who you are. What's your thoughts about what I just talked about, Alan?
Well, the person you said opening up, thank you for all that, Doug.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted a fair market.
Right.
That sounds so loving and kind and sensitive. What does it mean, fair? Everybody gets the same thing? That's not fair. Capitalism. The term is used a lot. I don't think it's understood, maybe, but it's real. For me, it's about the private ownership of property and the means of production. Private, not government. Fair means that everybody has an equal opportunity, not an outcome. If you're looking for equal outcome, then you're looking for total government control. And the equality of outcome will suck. It won't be pretty. And one thing I'm learning as we go through all of this, especially today, and Ben Franklin talked about the requirements of a virtuous society. And it occurred to me, being virtuous actually requires effort. And if you have a bunch of lazy people who don't want to work at being virtuous, then you want someone else to control everything so it's fair. Freedom's not free, and it's not without effort. Sometimes, and we've had freedom, but it doesn't mean that at different times society doesn't impose limits on it, because society has. If you want to get an idea of how imposing society has been over the centuries, Look at the history of women's wear, even just in the last century. What a woman could wear in public, what she couldn't wear in public, how it changed over time. Can you imagine a gal in a bikini being transported back to the late 1700s? Okay,
Right.
no, it's not going to happen. Laissez-faire is a term they knew. Let it be. Hands off, minimal government. On the other hand, is communism. Communism is total government control of everything. And I still remember back in the day when the Soviet Union was in full force. Didn't they have a little wheat problem? Yeah, they did. And who did they have to buy wheat from? Oh, the capitalists.
Socialism is parasitic.
Yeah. I'd seen a few articles about North Korea, for example. Very small country, very tightly controlled. If you're not one of the elites, you cannot access the worldwide internet. They actually have a limited, I forget the number, it's not that many. In North Korea, there is a limited number of different hairstyles that men can have and women can have. That's it. You want to travel, you have to get permission. You want to live in the capital, you absolutely have to get permission because it's considered a privilege. That's communism. I don't see anything attractive about it. If I have to work hard or harder to take care of my freedom, liberty, and rights, so be it. How's the Soviet Union doing today? Oh, it went away too. They'll all eventually go away because the people in charge only seem to really care about the moment. And they want more and more power. And the leaders of the communist countries, they're not living the way the average person lives.
No, communism, socialism is great for the leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing it doesn't do, and this, in a way, this is part of capitalism, laissez-faire. Do you have to work at being a better person in a free market, in a capitalistic society? Yeah, you do. Because you're not going to have the attitude, oh, the government will just give me whatever I need, so I don't have to work hard. I don't have to create. I don't have to develop. That's a society that will eventually go away. For me, one of our biggest problems nowadays is communist China. And when I talk about China, I'm not really talking about the people, the culture, the history. It's the CCP, Communist China, Communist Chinese Party. And they're running a country that is the most polluted country in the world. Some years ago, the World Health Organization did an analysis. I mentioned this before on radio. Did an analysis of the 500 most polluted cities in the world. Of the 500, about 260 of 500 were in China alone. If you take the top 6 countries, you had over 400 of the 500. But China holding more than half of the top 500 polluted cities in the world. We are talking really heavily polluted. They're polluting the air, the water, the ground. And how many of the top 500 polluted cities in the world were in the U.S., Doug?
I think that was a big goose egg.
Big zero. Yet we, to me, this is one main reason why you don't buy things from China, because you are supporting the most polluting country in the world. And if you care about the environment, because the CCP doesn't, then you're going to do what you can to keep it clean. But free market is the ability it incentivizes creativity and gives people the opportunity to do better. Having everything controlled by government just shuts it down.
In the YouTube chat room, Call Me Mom said, freedom is not safe either. It's just safer than the alternatives. Dangerous freedom or peaceful slavery?
Thank you, Thomas Jefferson. Yes.
All right, last topic. Republic under siege. We hear save our democracy all the time. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of America's constitutional design. Founding fathers deliberately created a republic, specifically with specific constitutional mechanisms to protect us from democracy. They had assumed that unchecked majority rule could lead to tyranny as surely as monarchical rule. James Madison articulated in Federalist Paper number 10, factions are inevitable in a free society. You're going to have your ideologies. You're going to have your battling ideas. You know what? Another word for a debate is liberty. It's the proper way to control the destructive potential of certain factions is to set them against each other through a carefully structured system of representation. This delicate balance has been systematically dismantled through two pivotal developments: the ratification of the 17th Amendment in 1913 and the Supreme Court's decision in Reynolds v. Sims in 1964. Together, these changes have transformed our federal system of government into something more resembling a centralized democracy, where the votes of the rural and minority communities are increasingly drowned out by urban majorities. The founders designed a bicameral legislature with these distinct characteristics: House being democratic and the Senate being the voice of the states, for a reason. The Senate, under its undemocratic, it is deliberately an undemocratic institution. It got the DSA people, we're going to get rid of the Senate. It's not very democratic. It's designed not to be democratic. And it's actually more democratic now than it was before. It didn't used to be voted in. It used to be the state legislatures appointing those senators. The structure ensures that smaller rural states aren't overwhelmed by larger, more populous urban states. Same principle is reflected in many state constitutions, where the state senates provided disproportionate representation to rural counties or regions. In other words, it was one per county or per district to give the rural areas, the smaller populated areas, a voice. But here's the thing. Once everything started changing and we became more democratic, then what happens is you wind up with all of this overreach and control from the population centers, the democratic voice. You have a loss of the rural voice as a result. And urban dominance. And there are policy consequences that have happened since the 17th Amendment ratification and the loss of the state senates being operating the way they did before because of Reynolds v. Sims. The combined effect of the 17th Amendment and Reynolds v. Sims has been the systematic marginalization of rural voices in American politics. Rural communities represent not just a minority of the population, but a distinct way of life with legitimate interests that differ from those of urban dwellers. And as we see the rise of democratic socialists and other centralized ideologies, urban population centers tend to favor more centralized government solutions. Without constitutional protections, the rural areas become subject to the tyranny of the majority. Their values and interests overwhelmed by urban preferences. And let me ask you a question, folks. Do you want someone from the city telling a farmer how to farm? I mean, it goes beyond creating a dangerous polarization. It goes way beyond rural communities feeling alienated. It actually destroys the very fabric and the individual parts of the system. In communist countries, what it led to was the death of over 100 million people through famines and starvation, executions, gross mismanagement by central planners. Reclaiming our republic form of government requires addressing both the 17th Amendment and Reynolds v. Sims. And while challenging, these steps are essential to restoring the balance of power that the founders intended. Repealing the 17th Amendment restores state sovereignty by giving states direct representation in the federal government. Rebalances the political equation between urban and rural interests and would create a natural check on federal expansion of power. And the reality is, when it comes to repealing the 17th Amendment, the only way it's going to happen is through an Article 5 convention. I know there's some of you out there, oh, no, not convention. I get it, but that's the only way you're going to get it. And reversing Reynolds v. Sims, in order for that to happen, that means getting the case to the United States Supreme Court. And while the high court precedents are not easily overturned, several approaches could restore balance to state legislative representation. Supreme Court reversal, a future court could recognize constitutional error in Reynolds, or return apportionment authority to the states. The constitutional amendment could explicitly affirm the state's authority to determine their own legislative structure. State initiative, states could implement creative solutions that balance population-based representation with geographic representation within the constraints of current doctrine. And there's other measures we can use to help restore Republican principles. Localism, encouraging greater local control over education, land use, other matters best handled at the community level. Notice I threw land use in there. Protecting natural rights, vigorously defending all natural rights, whether enumerated or not in the Bill of Rights, including the right to keep and bear arms, which serves as the final check on governmental overreach. Civic education, reinvigorating public understanding of our constitutional republic and the principles of federalism. The restoration of our Republican form of government requires the concerted effort of patriots who understand the dangers of unchecked democracy and the importance of balanced representation. We must educate ourselves and others, study the Constitution and the founders' writings to understand principles of federalism and Republican government. Support constitutional amendments, advocate for the repeal of the 17th Amendment and other measures that would restore balance to our system. Engage locally, participate in local government and community organizations to rebuild the foundations of self-government. Elect principled representatives. Support candidates who understand and respect constitutional design of our government. And, of course, what we talked about at the very beginning of the show, petition for redress. Exercise our constitutional right to petition the government for redress of grievances, as articulated in the First Amendment. Our founders designed a brilliant system of government that balanced competing interests and secured minority rights while allowing for democratic participation. This system has been gradually eroded by allegedly well-intentioned but misguided reforms that moved us away from our Republican roots toward a more centralized democracy. And by understanding the damage caused by the 17th Amendment and Reynolds v. Sims, and by working to restore the constitutional balance they disrupted, we can begin to reclaim the republic that the founders bequeathed to us. This is not a partisan issue, but a constitutional one that affects all Americans who value liberty and self-government. And the time has come to restore the proper balance between urban and rural interests, between state and federal authority, and between democracy and republicanism. And only by doing so can we ensure that America remains the land of liberty for all of its citizens, not just the majority who happen to live in the most populous areas. The wonderful thing about not being on AM radio anymore, sir, is we are not cut off at the top of the hour. I could say to you, Alan, without us going too far past the top of the hour, if you had anything to say about what I just said.
No, I think, we got our 2 hours in, and I think you summed it up very well.
You want to
And
plug yourself?
Sundays, 5 to 7 p.m. West Coast time on Patriot Soapbox for the Republic. And website FedEd, FEDED.us for basic monetary system education. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I am Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution, DouglasVGibbs.com. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America. My friends, God bless you. We'll see you next Saturday right here. 2-hour show. Thursdays in the afternoon, I've got my Mr. Constitution hour for 1 hour. I am also on at MrConstitution.com. That's mr-constitution.com. That's the Untold History Channel's show that has me on the air on Tuesdays from 3 to 4:30 Pacific. And we are going through American history right now. And then when we get done with that, we'll go back through lessons in the Constitution. And I am, and once a week I am on with Warhamster at rumble.com/Warhamster. Capitalize the W and the H. And right now we are going through line by line Madison's notes during the Constitutional Convention. And then I am also on Patriot Soapbox, not only on Sundays with Alan, but on Fridays from 2 to 4 Pacific with my wife. Friday Live. Check it out. DouglasVGibbs.com. If you want to learn about it, hit radio, hit video. You can get more about it. And, of course, read what I write every day at Political Pistachio. PoliticalPistachio.com. For some reason, it's not forwarding right. That's okay. Just go to DouglasVGibbs.com and hit the blog link. Or you can go to DouglasVGibbs.com/PoliticalPistachio with a hyphen between those last two words. It's been a pleasure being here. All of you, thank you for spending the time with me. God bless. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.